record. And I'm going to go ahead and admit everybody, and we'll get going. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Lucas Clay. I'm from Clemson Extension Associate working on the Climate Smart program along with my colleagues here. We're going to get started in just a moment. We'll let a few more people roll in and then we'll get going. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all for being here. Today is our first webinar in a series of webinars related to climate smart forestry and the climate smart commodities project. And a variety of speakers are going to talk about different parts of the program, from implementation to measurements to marketing. We're going to start by talking a lot about the program implementation, how Jacob and I are enrolling landowners and the process associated there. We're going to go through some of the research that will be done on the properties that are enrolled, and then we'll have a question and answer session. To that end, you may notice you are muted. If you have questions, please enter them into the Q&A box or the chat, and we will have a time at the end of this webinar, probably about 20 minutes or so, for a question and answer session. This webinar is also going to be recorded. So if you know of other folks that need to see it or you want to review it, that will be available on the Climate Smart YouTube channel after the webinar. But without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So today we're going to introduce a little bit about what is a climate smart commodity and how is this program different. But the definition of a climate smart commodity is an agriculture commodity that uses that is produced using agriculture, ranching, farming, or forestry practices to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or sequester carbon. Coming from USDA and have the opportunity to incentivize the sequestration of carbon for climate benefits. So the practices are important because we're doing three major things here. We're increasing productivity in our forests across South Carolina. We're enhancing the resilience. So this is reducing the impact on forests related to disaster and disease and hurricanes, for example, and also adapting to climate change in the long term. And ultimately, we're reducing emissions. So we are sequestering carbon into our forests, which helps mitigate climate change and mitigate the impact to the constituents in South Carolina. So Climate smart forestry specifically is looking at helping to move forest land to the next level of management. So we have three categories, and many of the landowners on the call that have been enrolled already will know that we have three categories of restoration, improvement, and maintenance. And a lot of times, if you're in a situation where we want to get trees growing, sequestering carbon on the property, and then we also, if you already have that happening, we want to incentivize you to keep those trees so they continue to sequester carbon, creating this climate smart commodity. So the idea is that we're using these three different categories to move restoration. We want to restore land, plant more trees. We want to improve forest land, so take unmanaged forest land and move it into managed state so that it has additional carbon sequestered, and then also co-benefits and other ecosystem services like water quality. And then if your land is already in a managed state, we want to maintain it in that state. We don't necessarily want to immediately cut down trees. We want to prolong rotations. We want to increase resilient species like longleaf for additional climate benefits. So as I mentioned, there's three different categories we're going to talk about today. Implementation, measurement, and market development. The implementation side is done by myself and Jacob Murray, Extension Associates, where we provide training, technical support, and then the site visits to determine if you would be incentivized for this program. The measurement side is a lot to do with our research side, which we're going to have some folks talk about in a little bit. And then also the market development side is actually expanding the opportunity for the sale of these commodities and ideally creating a market where these climate smart products or commodities are valued at a higher rate. So we're going to have some folks talk about that as well. But now I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my colleague Jacob, and he's going to go through some of the program requirements.
Hey everybody, how's it going? If you have met me before, you've talked to me on the phone, you have definitely heard a lot of this information that I'm about to tell you. But pretty much, I'm just going to kind of talk about the specific programs as well as the enrollment process. And then if you have any questions, like Lucas said, I can try and field those at the end. As you probably can guess, the overall project goal is to increase the acreage and the number of farms using climate smart practices here in South Carolina. For Clemson University, we have 4 pilot products that we're involved with: peanuts, leafy greens, forages for beef cattle, and forest products. I'm going to just be talking about forest products today, so hopefully that's what you're here for. If you're interested in any of the other pilot commodities, just stick around to the end and we'll get you in contact with whoever you need to get in contact with. And we can go to the next slide. And so as some of you may know, one of the requirements to enrolling into this program is that you're open to research. For some of you, that's just going to be filling out entry and exit surveys. But for those of you that want to be a little bit more involved or a little bit more interested in getting involved with research in Clemson University, we do have some great research projects that are currently underway, and we'll have a bunch more moving forward. I'm not going to talk about them too much because we have some of those researchers here today that are going to talk about their projects. But pretty much everything from, gas exchange and forest ecosystems to pollinator and avian diversity, to forest pest and pathogen abundance, to harvesting operation efficiency. And so we're kind of casting a broad net with our research. And so if you are interested in helping out or, being a part or maybe even participating in some capacity, please don't hesitate to reach out. Ooh, and Lucas, we can go to the next slide. Did we miss one? Okay, yeah. And so in addition to research, we are also trying to develop and expand markets for climate smart commodities. I'm going to let Marzi talk about this a little bit more, but as of right now, we are, sending out industry as well as consumer preference surveys to see, one, if there is a market for climate smart commodities, and also is there a willingness to pay maybe a higher price point for those products. Very similar to an SFI certification, what we're trying to do is increase transparency within that system. And so hopefully you'll be able to go and buy a product at the store that says this is a climate smart product, and you'll be able to trace that product all the way to procurement at the mill. And so as of right now, we're trying to create that certification and enter into that market. And like I said, I probably butchered that explanation, but Marzi will explain it a little bit better here in a second. What I think is relatively unique about climate smart forestry and climate smart forestry products is that the forestry practices that you're probably already implementing or traditional forestry practices typically coincide or complement climate smart forestry practices that we're asking you to implement. And so the pathway to market should be relatively easier, but I'm going to let Marzi kind of explain that. And we can move on. All right, so for specific programs that we have, I guarantee if you've met me in the field, I talked your ear off about this for about 20 minutes. I'm going to do the same thing again. But we do have some new updates, so please stay tuned. We have some general requirements for enrollment into each one of our three force incentive programs. One, if you are already enrolled in an NRCS cost share program or some other cost share program that is funding you for the same practice, we can't double dip. And so even if we kind of miss that in that initial screening process, that's going to get flagged down the line within NRCS, and it's going to cause problems for us, and it's going to cause problems for you all. So please don't double dip. We can only enroll between 20 and 100 acres. You can enroll in multiple incentive programs, but they each individually have to be at least 20 acres and cannot add up to more than 100 acres total. In addition to that, we are only dealing with pine stands, or at least stands that are 50% or more dominated with pine. So we're not dealing with hardwood stands at all. We also require all of our applicants to be enrolled in the FSA program, so the Farm Service Agency program, and we require FSA farm maps as well as FSA numbers, track numbers, field numbers, and a subsidiary of print. That's how you're going to receive all of your funding. So we need that kind of up front. We also need that to submit a CPA-52 form, which I will talk about here in a second. But pretty much having said all that, I do also want to say that this is a reimbursement program. And so as well as it being an incentive program, you're not going to receive any funds until the end if you choose to enroll. And so the burden of scheduling as well as paying for some of those operations out of pocket really falls on the landowner. And Kelly just actually said this in the chat, and she made a good point. So subsidiary prints, we are going to need a subsidiary print when you enroll, as well as the subsidiary print of the year in which you receive funding. I think that's correct. So we're probably going to need two subsidiary prints to make sure you're in compliance with the AD 1026 and the AD 2047, which are just environmental evaluations. And so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. As far as the individual programs, like Lucas mentioned, we have really three categories. You've probably heard me refer to them as the afforestation, and then the unmanaged and managed timber stand improvement programs. They changed up the titles on me a little bit, and I am a late adopter. So for the restoration of non-forested land, that's pretty much the afforestation incentive program. And pretty much all that is we're trying to incentivize landowners to either convert from agricultural land or pasture land to timberland. And so we're looking to incentivize landowners who maybe want to do some sort of timberland conversion like that to plant higher quality seedlings. So they need to be loblolly seedlings, better than open pollinated, or they need to be longleaf seedlings. So second, third generation loblolly or longleaf. One of the unique things about the afforestation incentive program is that we offer a higher incentive price point. And so instead of $150 per acre just to cover the cost of planting, we also add an additional $300 an acre to kind of offset that foregone revenue from planting to that first thinning. So because you're taking agricultural crops out of rotation, we're going to pay you a little bit more to plant those trees until you can get to that first thinning. So $450 an acre for the afforestation program. And we do have supporting practices for all of our main practices. So if needed, we can do site prep between $100 and $300 per acre for either mechanical or chemical site prep. And then you can also do site prep with just prescribed burning, or you can use prescribed burning as a release treatment. And so we do have some add-ons if you're looking to do that. And we can move to the next slide, Lucas. And so here's where it gets a little bit more complicated, as y'all probably know. They call it the Improvement and the Maintenance of Forest Program, but I call it the Unmanaged and the Managed Timber Stand Improvement Program because it's really all based on the quality and the management style of that stand. So for unmanaged stands, something that has a lot of natural regeneration, has not been planted, does not have or hasn't had an entry in the last 10, 15, 20 years, and is largely, I mean, for lack of a better term, unmanaged, we will incentivize you to get that into a managed state. And typically that's going to involve coming in there and doing some sort of timber harvest. And so we do offer a $100 per acre incentive for thinning. And that again casts a wide net for thinning. So that can be extremely intense or not as intense. You could be taking out rows every, 2 chains, or you could be taking out a majority of the overstory, kind of doing a shelter wood harvest or a seed tree harvest. And so there's a couple of different things that we can do to get that stand, like I said, into more of a um, managed state on a regular rotation. Under the unmanaged program, we also offer tree and shrub establishment, so planting incentives at $150 an acre. But we only incentivize if you're looking to underplant loblolly or longleaf, or if it's been 2 years since that clear cut or since that tornado came through and took out that stand. And so whatever happened to that stand prior, if it's not there anymore, it has to be at least 2 growing seasons before we can classify it as unmanaged and provide you with that incentive money. And in addition to that, we also have supporting practices for prescribed burning as well as herbaceous weed treatment. If you are going to take advantage of the underplanting or the planting after a clear cut or something like that, your site prep would be the prescribed burning and herbaceous weed treatment. We don't do site prep outside of the afforestation program. As far as managed timber stands, we do offer similar incentives, but we do not incentivize first or second thinnings. And so if you have a managed stand that's been planted, that's on a regular thinning rotation, that is, I mean, being managed the right way, we only offer thinning incentives to facilitate longleaf regeneration, or if you're planning on coming and underplanting longleaf. And so we'll incentivize thinning and harvesting operations if you're going to plan on, taking out a large portion of the overstory and coming in and underplanting longleaf, to either convert from a loblolly to a longleaf stand, or to convert from an even age management style to an uneven age management style. In addition to that, for managed stands, we also offer $200 per acre for selection harvesting to create structure within those stands. And so if you have a mature stand that you're looking to take, just a select number of trees out for whatever reason, we are creating intra-stand structure within that forest. And so that is linked to increased resiliency, which is a large part of a lot of our climate smart objectives. Like I said, we have the partnership with the Longleaf Alliance. And so pretty much anything that you're planning on doing with longleaf, if you're looking to establish it, to thin it, to convert to longleaf, we probably have an incentive that is going to be helpful in that process. We also have something called a prolonged rotation program. A lot of you probably on the call are either enrolled or maybe want to be enrolled in that program. Unfortunately, we are completely full at the moment. That program is really designed to increase the rotation ages of mature stands. And so if you have a mature loblolly stand, that the next thing that you can do with it, the only thing that you can do with it is clear cut it and start over. We're actually incentivizing you $1,500 an acre to prolong that final harvest for an additional 5 years in the name of carbon sequestration. Currently in South Carolina, the average maturity age for loblolly pine stands is about 28 years old across the entire state. But the Forest Service actually manages their pine plantations on 35-year rotation because they're not really subject to those economic strains. And so we'd like to kind of push private landowners to mimicking more of what the U.S. Forest Service is doing, increasing those rotation ages and increasing that carbon sequestration. And all of these other practices, especially, well, you can probably understand from planting how that's going to increase carbon sequestration, but thinning and prescribed burning, typically what we're doing is we're decreasing the amount of competition in those stands for those really high productive, fast growing species. And so just like when you thin your stands and you get a growth rate boost, we're doing the same thing. the focus is just carbon. And so you're still implementing pretty similar practices, but we are looking at it from a different perspective. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but Lucas, we can move to the next slide. All right, so if you are interested in enrolling, or if you haven't done so yet, please go to climatesmartsc.org. That's how you're going to get on our enrollment page. And pretty much what you'll do is you'll go to that website, you'll scroll down to the enrollment tab, and there's going to be a little paragraph that says that you've passed the deadline to apply. Can just completely ignore that. Go ahead and click the link, fill out the information, and your name and contact information should show up on an Excel spreadsheet that Lucas and I kind of go line by line through. Lucas, we can go to the next slide. And so this is kind of the outline of how we do our enrollment process. And so once you get on that list, it's a first come, first served basis. We just go down the list one by one. We'll give you a call. We'll kind of have a similar conversation to what I'm doing right now. And I'll just talk to you, see if there's anything that you specifically want to do with your property, if you might be eligible, if you fit the parameters for some of our programs, and then we'll try and set up a site visit. Lucas or myself will come out to your property and we'll do kind of a field visit where we'll talk to you on your property. You can ask us whatever questions you want to, and we'll kind of see if you're eligible. Once we have all of those field notes and we've talked to you, we can probably give you a pretty good idea of whether or not you're going to get enrolled or not. But we take that information back and we approve you through Clemson Extension internally. We typically let you know that you've been approved by us, and we're going to continue with that enrollment process. And then the next step is to submit a CPA-52 form with NRCS. This is where we start hitting some road bumps. And so in order for us to submit that CPA-52 form, we are going to need all those FSA documents that I mentioned earlier. And once we submit the CPA-52 form, they originally told us it would be about 3 to 4 weeks before they got back to us, but it's probably going to be closer to around 2 or 3 months. So some of you, probably most of you, we have your CPA form submitted if you're currently enrolled, but we're just waiting to hear back from NRCS. Once that CPA form is approved and sent back to us, the next step is to generate a participation agreement, which we'll send to you, and it'll just outline everything that we're agreeing on. It'll give you exactly what we're supposed to do, exactly how you're supposed to do it, and it'll kind of just show you all the things that you're agreeing to. One of the things, obviously, being open to research and surveys and things like that. Once you sign that and date it and send it back to us, you have 18 months from the time you sign that and get it back to us to get all of your forest operations done with a 6-month extension upon written request. And so if you can't get your operations done within that 18 to 24-month window, unfortunately, we'll have to remove you from the program. That's a little different if you're already enrolled in prolonged rotation. The only supporting practice that we have for prolonged rotation is prescribed fire. And so the requirement is pretty much just to not cut your trees and get that burn done before you receive payment in the spring of 2028. Lucas, we can move forward. A couple of new things to note for people that are already enrolled or who are looking to be enrolled. We do want to make sure that you are retaining some documentation and some proof of implementation. And so specifically for well, let me back up for a second. For all forest operations, you should be, complying with SCBNPs and safety protocols through the South Carolina Forestry Commission. If Holly Welch, our SCBNP forester, comes out there and sees a bunch of loggers dumping slash into like a ephemeral drainage ditch or something like that, that's not going to fly. And so we want to make sure that we're doing everything the right way. For specific forest operations, so for things like prescribed fire and herbaceous weed treatment, I have some examples of some things that you might want to keep for your records, just for your own personal records as well as for us. But there are some specific things that we require. So for prescribed fire, we do want a copy of that burn plan. You're required to submit a burn plan to the South Carolina Forestry Commission. We just want a copy of it to make sure it's been done. If you're going to do any herbaceous weed treatment or any chemical site prep, we just want to know the number of gallons used, the ratio, and the type, right? We don't need to know how much you spent or anything like that. We just want to know that you actually did purchase that herbicide and that you did use it for site prep. For mechanical site prep, we just want to know how you're doing it. If you're scalping it, we just need to know what equipment you're using, and what, yeah, and pretty much just how you're implementing it. It is important to note, I think I forgot to mention it earlier, that after that landowner agreement is signed and you have that 18 months to get everything done, or that 24-month extension, you'll just let us know. You'll let Lucas or I know, you give us a call and say, hey, everything's done, come check it out. We will have to do a verification. So we'll have to do a verification site visit where we come out there and we just make sure that you did what you said you did. Whoops. Okay, so sorry about that. Other than that, for planting and underplanting of your pines, we give you kind of a lot of leeway as far as the spacing and the planting, but we do want to know what that is. So if you're planting longleaf, it's probably going to be planted at a lower density than loblolly. We kind of give you a wide range of planting densities, but we don't want you, putting out, 100 trees per acre, and we also don't want 720 trees per acre, right? We want to kind of hit that sweet spot where your consulting forester is going to recommend it. If you're planting, we either need it to be longleaf or second or third generation loblolly. And so we're going to want to know what the spacing is, what you're planting, and where you bought it from, how many seedlings you bought, and what type they are. That way we know those three things. And then we'll just come out there and verify that. As far as thinning or any harvesting is concerned, you should have a logging contract of some sort. Just give us a copy of that. Let us know. We're going to know that a harvest took place, but we just want to make sure that we have that documented and filed away. For the prolonged rotation program, we don't really require you to document anything. We understand there's no harvesting until the spring of 2028 of any kind. If you are going to do prescribed fire, give us that burn plan. But we also would like it if you documented all of the other practices that you're doing to that stand during that period of time. So if you're running cattle underneath that stand for a certain part of the year, just let us know that you're doing that so we don't get any surprises if, that question pops up by some means or something like that. I think that's pretty much it for the documents and proof of implementation. If y'all have any specific questions on that, or if you think, hey, I don't know if I should keep this or not, just give me a call or shoot me an email and I'll let you know. Like I said earlier, a couple of new things. We receive a lot of FSA maps without field numbers. If you know that you don't have a field number on your map for at least the stands that you're looking to enroll, you need to get an updated FSA map and get that to us as soon as possible. I think we reached out to everybody who didn't and have gotten replies back from pretty much everybody, but we will be reaching out again if we haven't. Also, like I said, the subsidiary print, and I think Kelly had said something in the chats. And then we need one for the year. Okay. Yeah, so pretty much we need the subsidiary print for your enrollment, and then we're going to need that subsidiary print as well when you implement those treatments. Okay, so not necessarily when you receive payment, but at least when you implement those treatments. That way we know that you were in compliance when you did what you said you were going to do. On a personal note, if you are conducting a timber harvest of any kind, please contact me before those loggers move onto your property. We are actually working on a harvesting study where we're trying to look at the efficiency around the state. And so we just want to make sure that that is taken care of. And Lucas, could you actually go back a couple of other slides? A couple slides to the right there. Sorry. Back to the timeline. Yeah. So, and I want to make this very, very clear. And so enrollment, it goes like we have the internal approval process, but you're not officially approved until that CPA form is approved and that participation agreement is signed. And so for people that are implementing logging operations, I know that you're kind of at the whim of the logger. And if it were me, I wouldn't tell him necessarily no. What I would say is that if a harvest took place before that CPA-52 form or that participation agreement is signed, I'm going to continue with the enrollment process and see if we can't go ahead and get you that incentive money. I am gonna tell you that we cannot guarantee anything until after that CPA-52 form is approved and that participation agreement is signed. And so just know if you do implement any forest operations before those two things are signed and approved, we can't guarantee anything. It's very likely that you would still receive funding, but I don't want you coming at me and yelling at me later and saying, "Hey, you promised me this money, and now I'm not allowed to get it." And so we're not in the business of giving false hope to anybody. But that's it for that slide, Lucas. And we also have 27 project partners statewide, most notably the Longleaf Alliance, Forestry Association, Center for Air, Property and Preservation, and things like that. You should probably be hearing from some of these people and some of these organizations moving forward as we continue to have webinars. So please stay tuned. We have some great people from the Longleaf Alliance that are planning on giving some pretty in-depth talks. So yeah, I think that's about it for me. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Marzi. If anybody has any specific questions about their property or their program, please go ahead and put it in the chat or just give me a call at your earliest convenience. Thanks.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, Lucas. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Marzia Mutalabi. I am an economist at Department of Forestry and Environmental Conservation, and I'm stationed at Baruch Institute of Coastal Ecology and Forest Sciences. And for the marketing side of Climate Smart Forestry project, I work with Dr. Joanne Ureta. She is a postdoctoral fellow at our department, and Mia Pormon, who is a PhD student working on this project. So market development part of the project has three main components. We are focusing, trying to capture actually all components of marketing of wood products from forestry climate smart project. So this slide shows a snapshot of activities that we are going to go through over the course of 5 years. We are focusing on producer sides, which you're all producers and landowners. Then we will focus on how we are going to process the wood products through the industry folks and then the final consumers. So the main objective of the marketing side is sending different types of surveys to producers, industry and consumers. Lucas, can you move forward? Sorry. Next. For the producer side, we have two major surveys. First, we are planning to send a statewide survey to South Carolina forest landowners to estimate their willingness to accept to enroll in forest improvement practices through climate smart forestry. And these practices include thinning to facilitate carbon sequestration, selective harvesting, prolonged rotation that Jacob talked about, and plant hiring a higher quality seedling. And the second type of the survey, which gears towards the enrolled landowners, and we would really appreciate if you all who are enrolling in this program respond to the survey, is we are trying to understand the perception towards accepting and adopting climate smart forestry practices. And the perception, we are trying to measure the perception before enrollment and after enrollment. So we literally are going to send you two surveys gauging your perception now and after you enroll in this practice, these types of practices. Next. Lucas, could you please move next? Thank you. For the consumer side of the project, we are planning to send another statewide survey to estimate the premium of having a climate smart label on 4 types of wood products, including the wood parcel, wood panels, furnitures, papers, and packaging. So we are measuring the premium that is associated with the climate smart label or logo that we are going to design in this project. And for the industry side, could you please move forward? Okay. For the industry side of the project, we are planning to investigate that the cost associated with the uh, adopting climate smart forestry practices and the cost of processing and selling the wood products from this project. We will engage with loggers and millers in South Carolina, and we will conduct several interviews with them. And also, we are planning to send a survey to mass timber companies and home builders to figure out if they will be using wood products from this project or not. So what we are asking you and all the enrolled landowners to please participate in our perception survey. At this point, we are pre-testing our statewide survey. And if any of you would like to help us with the research side of the project and you would like to see our survey before we send it out and want to be part of the pre-testing of the survey, I would appreciate if you put your name and email address here, so or mailing address even, to send you the survey, and please give us your feedback. We will incorporate your feedback into our questionnaire and send it out.
All right, thank you, Marzi. Appreciate it. The next, we're going to move on to Dr. Tom O'Halloran to talk about his research.
Hello, folks. My name is Tom O'Halloran. Can you hear me, Lucas?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm also professor in forestry and stationed at the Baruch Institute of Coastal Ecology and Forest Science down in Georgetown. And I'm glad to talk to you today a little bit about some of the research objectives embedded in this project. So just a little background, Lucas said in the beginning, the motivation for the Climate Smart project overall is to help take carbon or carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. We have too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And there's so much interest in trees because trees are very efficient at doing this naturally. As part of photosynthesis, a tree takes carbon dioxide out of the air and puts it into its tissue. That's the leaves and the branches and the bole and the roots. But the whole forest is also giving some carbon dioxide back as part of that process. So the soil and the dead leaves and everything are also giving, some of the sequestered carbon back to the atmosphere. So the research objectives of this project are really to figure out how climate smart practices and which climate smart practices help sequester carbon or take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere the best. And in traditional forestry, we're always interested in that above ground growth, pretty much the tree bole. But in the context of the atmosphere, we're interested in all of that, the process that I just described. And so the way we end up studying that is we can actually measure all the carbon dioxide going into and coming out of the forest using sensors that we have to put above the forest. So we typically use these towers, and they're making measurements all the time, day and night. And they're sort of using techniques based in weather or atmospheric science, or partially like measuring the wind speed, but we're measuring it 10 times a second. And we're measuring carbon dioxide 10 times a second. And from this, every half an hour, every 30 minutes, we get a measure of the carbon going into and coming out of the forest. And in general, these towers are measuring probably at the stand level, tens of acres. So when we do these studies, we're looking for stands that are of a minimum size where they're all getting the same treatment, so that we can, from the tower, measure the effect of that treatment across that parcel, that stand. Next slide. So here's a couple towers that my group operates now. The one on the left's a loblolly plantation up in Virginia. The one on the right is a longleaf plantation here at Hobcob Barony in Georgetown. This is what a tower looks like in a young stand that's just been harvested and replanted. And depending on how fast the trees grow, we can use a short tower, 10 or 20 feet tall, for the first few to several years of a study. And one of the things that's so interesting to us is both of these stands in these photos, even after trees are planted and they start growing, and we know that the tree is sequestering carbon and holding it in the tree biomass. Both of these stands are actually giving off more carbon than they're receiving because of the clear cut, because of the disturbance to the soil and the slash that's left on the site and the stumps that are decaying, that these sites are really actually giving off a lot of carbon for several years in reality, in terms of what the atmosphere can feel. And so again, with the Climate Smart program, Jacob mentioned some of our practices that we're really targeting are trying to get away from clear cutting, extending rotations to minimize the number of times that happens, or thinning, going from single age stands to multi-age stands, so that we can avoid this state where the forest is really giving off more carbon than it's receiving. Of course, eventually the growth will make up for that, but if this stand, let's say these clear cuts give off carbon for 5 or 7 years, then you got to grow for another 5 or 7 years just to make up for that, just to get back to zero. So we're looking for landowners that would take systems like this. We have several of these systems available. They have to be of a minimum size, and you've got to hopefully be in a protected area where a system like that wouldn't be exposed to vandalism or theft. But we would love to partner with some landowners to get some of this equipment out into the field. The next slide, my last slide, is what these towers look like in mature stands. So those stands that are close to a final harvest that maybe you're going to extend a rotation or you're going to do a thinning on. We also really want to measure those too, but those are going to have to be pretty big stands. These are more substantial investments of research infrastructure, a little more complicated. These towers, if trees are 90 feet tall, these might need to be up to 100, 120 feet tall. So a little bit harder to do. I see a couple questions popping up. What's the minimum acreage? So for a short, for a clear cut that you're just planning, a short tower, if it's close to, we're going to think about putting the tower in the middle of the stand, and we're going to need, I'd really like to see at least 300 feet in all directions. And I think a 300-foot circle, that's going to work out to in the neighborhood of like 10, 20 acres, something like that. Yeah, maybe 10, 12 acres would be the very smallest in a clear cut. And as the stands get older, taller, then the acreage would have to get bigger and bigger. So you can reach out to Lucas, or Jacob if you're interested. I see some comments in the chat. I know Lucas has talked to some folks about this already, but reach out to us if you're interested in that. Thanks for your time.
Great, thanks so much, Tom. We're going to move on to Bryce Delacourt, who's going to talk about his avian research.
All right. Can you hear me all right, Lucas?
Yes.
Great. Hello, everyone. As Lucas said, my name is Bryce Delacourt. I'm a PhD student in the Forestry and Environmental Conservation Department here at Clemson, stationed at the university. And the part of my project is on avian populations and pine management. Basic overview, basic question of my project is investigating how forest management practices affects bird communities in South Carolina, specifically birds in these pine managed stands across the state, but mostly in the coastal plain area of the state. A reason why we are looking at birds as part of the project, birds are key ecological drivers of a lot of pine communities and key seed dispersers of many plant species throughout the ecosystem. They're also important predators for many insects that could prove detrimental to stands throughout infestation. A lot of woodpecker species do a lot of predation on insects such as like bark beetles and things like that that would be detrimental to a stand and the product at the end. What my research would look like, methods-wise on the field, bird observations are very non-invasive type of research. It will be me standing in your stand for a couple hours in the morning with binoculars, writing down species that I hear and see. Properties that are visited will be during sunrise and only a few hours afterwards, so about 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. during the summer months. The field season will occur between late April and to late June. This is like kind of the peak of migratory breeding bird populations in the state, and the peak of those populations inside these kind of pine stands and throughout your properties. And yeah, this is just a simple aerial imagery of a managed stand up here in Clemson, but kind of looking at what would your involvement be as a landowner on my project. First off, I want to do, if possible, personal introductions and property visits before observational season. Some of you have already been contacted by me, and I've set up dates to come and introduce myself in person. I think that's a big part of the project, is coming and explaining what I'm going to be doing, and kind of getting a tour of your property if possible, depending on your time schedule. Information regarding what works for you, and things such as simple questions regarding your property. Is there a gate to your property? What are the best available days for me to do to come visit on your property? Where to park? Things like that are just logistics, and what'll best be for you. And things such as, are you comfortable with me coming and doing research or observations on your property when you're not there? Things like that. And most importantly, being in contact and knowing I will be reaching out when I hope to be coming to do surveys, reaching out whether a couple weeks in advance or a couple days in advance, depending on flexibility, about when I hope to come and do some bird counts on your property. But again, very non-invasive in the way that it's just for a couple hours in the morning, but I hope to be doing as many pine stands as I can on your properties, depending on the location in the state, is depending on the time, I think, when I will be visiting. But we won't be able to hit every stand or every landowner in the property, in the project, but we hope to be calling out and reaching out to as many of you as I can. So be on the lookout for a call from me in the next month or so about setting up a time and introductions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bryce. And last but not least, we have Dr. Jess Hartshort, and she's going to discuss her research related to this grant.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction. I'm a forest health professor in FEC. And so we do mostly bugs and crud, and that's what we're working on with this. So next. So our portion of this project is essentially assessing the forest health component. So how these management practices are affecting the ecology of the system, similar to what Bryce was talking about, and he even mentioned insects. So we are working closely together on those questions. And so we're sort of looking at it from a beneficial insect or arthropod point of view, and also from a pest point of view. Pests mainly being bark beetles, which Bryce also mentioned a second ago. And beneficial, we are focusing on pollinators. And so we will be doing those collections throughout the study, but the pest assessment will actually probably end up being remote. So next. All right. So here is pictured on the right-hand side. That's Artie. She's one of my PhD students, and she is collecting pollinators using these bee bowls. And so these are just colored, basically like party bowls that we elevate off the ground a little bit. We put in some soapy water because that's non-toxic. So any mammals or birds or anything else, if they were to come along and drink it or eat the bugs in there, which happens sometimes, they won't be injured. But because we use soapy water, it does go bad kind of quickly. So we put them out, leave them there basically Monday through Friday. And so she goes out, places them. You can see the little stake here that's just keeping those off the ground. And then comes back 5 days later and collects them. So that is the extent of the pollinator collections. The goal is to do that for 1 week a month throughout the year, because here in South Carolina, we do see those pollinators all year long. So it would be a once a month collection. Okay, and next. And so the pest portion, we are hoping to use remote sensing for. We do have bark beetle traps and lures, and we have all of the stuff to collect them. But my lab manager has already counted over 310,000 bark beetles from another project, and he probably doesn't want to do that again. So most of that is going to be remote sensing, which would require some ground validation. So using satellite images that are readily available and then trying to identify potential hotspots of bark beetle populations, and then actually going and checking to see if the pests that we think are there are actually there. So there's not a whole lot of collecting on the pest side of things. But there could potentially be some opportunity for destructive sampling. So especially if there's like stressed trees that seem to be really infested, part of it could be felling some of those stressed trees and letting the beetles come out in the lab and doing it that way. And so there's a few different options and how we approach that. And that would be totally up for discussion, and will probably be more on like a case by case basis, just depending on what we end up finding with the remote sensing. So some other groups have done it. There's been mixed results, so we're not 100% sure how that will look as we go through it, but there's potential for remote sensing and field surveys, but not intensive or even as intensive as the pollinators. So that's pretty much what we're doing for my project. I think that was the last slide I sent.
Yep, that's perfect. Thanks so much, Dr. Hartshorn. And that concludes our research discussion. So we're going to go ahead and move into our time of Q&A. So if you have questions, go ahead and put those into the Q&A box that you'll see there, and we'll go through those in order. As I mentioned in the chat a bit ago, if you have further questions about any of this research, especially if you're interested in towers, please go ahead and email climatesmartforestry@clemson.edu, and we'll get you in contact with the correct people there. But I'm going to go ahead and bring in our implementation folks so we can answer some of these questions.
Yes, sorry, can we talk about the pretest if someone is interested in helping us with pretesting the survey, they can put their name and email address or mailing address here, or can email you or me.
Yeah, thanks, Marzi. So yeah, if you're interested in helping out with that survey, also please email climatesmartforestry@clemson.edu, and we'll get you in touch with the correct people there.
It looks like we have two questions in the Q&A box right now. Carolyn Poole asked, how difficult is it for a property that is air property owned by over 50 family members to become part of this program? I think that in this scenario, we're enrolling the land and we just need a mouthpiece or an advocate for that property. And so as long as you are part owner or you are involved in some capacity, we should be able to enroll you as the leader in that one. And also, and Lucas can confirm that for me, but Heath, you asked, can you have multiple prescribed burns in prolonged rotation? You can burn it as many times as you want, but we are only going to provide funding for the one time. And so you can put in fire breaks with that money. You can hire people, contract people to get that burn done, whatever you would like to do with that money, as long as the burn is completed and is conducted within that time period.
I just want to chime in on that question about the land that's owned by multiple people. I think that we have some folks that in that situation in the program, that would be a case-by-case basis though. And I think we would probably get the Center for Air Property Preservation involved just so that there isn't any legal situations or questions. So if that's something that you're interested in, reach out to Jacob or Lucas, and we can all get together and come up with a plan moving forward for that and that parcel.
Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, we have a question in the chat. What is the acreage limit for the farm projects? Kelly can maybe briefly mention that.
For the ag commodity projects, leafy greens, peanuts, and okay. So the beef project has an acreage maximum of 50 acres and minimum of 10 acres. The leafy greens is a minimum of 1/2 of an acre and a maximum of 8 acres. And then the peanut program is 10 acres minimum to 200 acres maximum.
You. All right, we have about 2 minutes left. If you have any other questions, please put them in the chat. Lisa Lord from the Longleaf Elias just wants you to know specifically about additional for burning cost share funding. They have available funding. Her email is there in the chat, or you can also email Climate Smart Forestry and we'll get you in touch with her.
And a lot of people have been asking if we offer incentives just for prescribed burning, and that is, as of right now, a supporting practice for a main practice. And so we would not just fund you to just burn your property.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate your attention to this program. Look forward to speaking with you either about your enrolled property or potentially enrolling you in the future. We will have more webinars coming up. Please look in your email for there's more webinars in the series. Also at climatesmartsc.org, we'll provide the Eventbrite links there as well. Again, if you have further questions, we might stay on for a couple more minutes, but you can always email climatesmartforestry@clemson.edu. Again, thank you all for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.
And if there's anyone with questions and you just want to unmute and ask the question, I think you're welcome to do that too. If I don't mind sticking around for a couple minutes.
Are folks able to unmute, or because of the webinar, is that turned off?
I'm sorry, that might be the case. I apologize.
I changed it now at this point. If there's somebody who wants to unmute, they can. Yes, the recording will be available on the Climate Smart YouTube channel.
Can we drop the link for that?
Kelly?
I can find it. I think Lucas
can
and
pull it up real
Jacob
quick.
will certainly follow back up with everyone and send the recording link as well. But I can let me see if I can find that real quick.
Yep, we can do that.
Is it that one, Kelly?
You beat me to it. That's it. So that's where it'll live.
Uh, how you doing? John Johnson here. I have a few questions. And I guess it's similar to the question I was asked earlier in terms of uh, the question of who would be the spokesperson for the family. At a certain point in time, everything regarding the property is going to be put in a trust. Will that affect membership within climate enrollment in the Climate Smart program at all? And like if say if I'm the spokesperson, but then 3 or 4 months down the line, it's the family property. Will that shift or would that affect things at all?
The main thing that would need to be in place, so all enrolled parcels of land have to have an FSA number.
Mhm.
So if the land is deeded and you're able to, and that would be something that you wouldn't be able to do if you don't have a deed for the property, then I don't believe you can get an FSA farm number. So if you have an FSA farm number for that land and all 50 owners, I don't know how that arrangement would work out, but we are just incentivizing the practices on the land. So that would, as I believe Jacob mentioned, as long as there's a point person for the property and all the FSA stuff is in compliance, then we could certainly work with with a situation like that.
Okay.
Do you
And-
know if the land has been assigned an FSA farm number?
It does have an FSA number, yes. Yeah.
And Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we do it, so we've had landowners ask, what happens if I pass away for an unexpected reason or something like that? We wouldn't kick you out of that program because you've enrolled the FSA and the land in there. So whoever it is next, that check would go to them.
Correct. So that would just be something that the landowner would need to communicate because everyone who's enrolled in the program has to enroll in our vendor system. And so that's the point of communication. So for receiving those payments, so that payment will likely get direct deposited into an account. I mean, I can think of several scenarios where that could get complicated, but I
But
mean,
if the
certainly we
property
would enroll
was,
someone because of that.
if we set up a trust, would that mitigate that risk or make sure that everything was smooth regardless?
So the payment would go into a trust.
Yeah.
Well, Tammy, have you worked with
I
any
think that
properties that has a
trust would have
trust?
to be registered in the byway system. And I'm almost certain, going back to the CPA approval stuff, I'm almost certain, according to the guidelines of the payouts, we can't pay if they don't have an approved CPA.
100%, right? Yeah, that's a requirement. So
Yeah.
that would be, but that happens, so your CPA approval would happen before you even receive your participation agreement. We would have to do a little more digging to answer that question about whether a trust can be enrolled in the byway in our vendor system.
Yeah, I can check on that with procurement, but I think if at the time of payment, if the property's in probate for some reason, the money would go to the probate. I think. I'll double check on that just to make sure.
Tammy, would you put your name and email into the chat so whoever wants to know the answer to that could reach out to you directly?
On it.
I know. You're always on it.
There you go. And my number is the 3386 number that's listed on there. So if you call that number, you're going to get me anyways.
Oh, and I have one other question. You said that the current program is full already. When will the next round, when will you start that next intake process? Around about what time?
So I can field that question. We have multiple rounds of funding that we go through. But specifically for the prolonged rotation program, there's no room. We have a certain amount of acreage and a certain amount of money that we have allotted to these incentive programs. And because that's such a high price point, and because the incentive requires us to, enroll people for an extended period of time, 4 to 5 years, we had to front load all of those people. And so that is why there's no more room in that prolonged rotation program, but everything else is pretty much fair game.
I'm
And-
curious if that answered that participant's question. Were you asking if about prolonged rotation specifically? Because you guys are still enrolling in the other practices currently. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're enrolling in the other practices, but I guess along the lines, because there are other, I guess, levels that one can enter. And so if we have to say, plant seedlings and that kind of thing, is there space in that program now, or is there potential space in that? And then, because we have to get down to the line and do a survey and figure out what's there now. But in the event that, we have to start out with replanting, is there a space for that in addition to the leafy greens, and the mulching and everything that comes, the other programs as well?
I'll reiterate, for the forest product stuff, we have room in every single program except for prolonged rotation, specifically. So $1,500 per acre for enrollment is not available, but every other practice is. As far as the other pilot commodities, I am not aware of enrollment. Kelly might have a better answer.
Yeah, those programs for this first implementation year, which is almost over, are full. We for the most part. But I will say, and I'm not sure, Jacob, if you mentioned this, but if you are enrolled in the forest products program, you cannot be enrolled in another one of our Climate Smart programs. So in order to, reach as many people as we can, and spread these incentives across the state as much as possible, then we're only allowing farmers and landowners to enroll in one of our 4 incentive programs.
And I might have been unclear in explaining that you can take advantage of multiple incentive programs within the forest products umbrella, as long as they're each individually 20 acres and don't add up to more than 100. But you couldn't do 20 acres of leafy greens and 20 acres of thinning. And so I probably should have made that a little bit more clear.
Easiest way to say it's one commodity per landowner.
I will remember that.
All right, it's
Thank
1:10 on the
everybody for your
dot.
time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Yeah, thank you all again. I think we're going to go ahead and close it out now. But if you have any other questions, again, email climatesmartforestry@clemson.edu, and we'll follow up with you. Thanks all.
Bye, guys.